of the pen of a writer could write every day, even this word could never contain how I've been blessed. Warmth in the winter, flowers in spring, laughter at summer, the changing of leaves, food on my table and a good place to sleep, clothes on my back and shoes on my feet. I have been blessed. I have been blessed. God is so good to me. Precious are his thoughts of you and me. No way I could count them, there's not enough time. So I'll just thank him for being so kind. God has been good, so good. I have been blessed. Arms that will raise, a voice that can talk, hands that can touch, legs that can walk, ears that can listen, eyes that can see. I've got to praise him as long as I breathe. I have been blessed. A mother and father, nurtured and raised, sister and brothers, memories made. Our pastor to lead us, this altar to pray. Stripes that can heal, the blood that still saves. I have been blessed. I have been blessed. God is so good to me. Precious are his thoughts of you and me. No way I could count them, there's not enough time. So I'll just thank him for being so kind. God has been good, so good. I have been blessed. We live in a country, the greatest on earth, where the flag stands for freedom and what it is worth. She stands in the harbor, Miss Liberty calls. All have gave some, but some gave it all, so we could be blessed. He's my shoulder to lead us, this altar to... When I am down, the rock where he leads me. When I'm overwhelmed, the place where he hides me under his wings. It's not just a song, he's the reason I sing. I have been blessed. I have been blessed. God is so good to me. Precious are his thoughts of you and me. No way I could count them, there's not enough time. So I'll just thank him for being so kind. God has been good, so good. I have been blessed.
James chapter number 1, again. It has been a while. We've had a little layoff here in our journey through James. Several things in the past few weeks have come up, and a lot of interruptions, and so it's been a while since we've been back here, but I'm not going to go back and review any of the past lessons for continuity's sake. You just have to act like you know what I'm talking about. We call this our journey a journey through James because it seems like James is doing that very thing, taking us on a journey through I think, several key issues that all of us deal with in this life. All of us as God's children, especially I think here in chapter 1, this is our 10th stop in this journey, our 12th lesson overall. Two of them had two-parters, but this is our 10th stop in this journey through James. Now, I think what I'm going to do after tonight, most all of my lessons will be on Wednesday night. We won't have too many on Sunday night or Sunday morning, maybe one or two, I don't know. But then the rest of them will be on Wednesday night. But it's been already an eventful journey, if I can put it that way, because James covers a lot of important stuff here in this first chapter. And now it's kind of time for a test. I didn't know what else to call this lesson, but we'll just call it a test of your religion. It's time for a test. Now, when you were in school, your teacher from time to time would pause in the lessons that they're giving and kind of see where your level of understanding is of the material, and they would give you a test. Sometimes they call it a pop quiz. Now, most people do not like tests. I was kind of a strange boy. Go figure. I was kind of a strange boy that I didn't mind tests too much. I actually rather enjoyed tests sometimes. And it's not because I'm smart. You know better than that. You've been around me long enough. I'm not that sharp, you know. It's not because I'm smart at all, but what I was good at was memorizing. I could read something over a few times and just about quote it back to you verbatim. Now, that didn't mean I learned anything, because I usually forgot about it right after the test is over with. But I could read something a few times and just about quote it back to you. So I was kind of strange in that I didn't mind tests usually, but I got to tell you, this is a test that I do not enjoy. And I think most of us would not enjoy this kind of test. It is a spiritual test. It is a test of your religion. And I think it's a needed test. Listen to what James says in the last two verses of this chapter. James says, if any man among you seem to be religious, and he says, bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Pure religion, he says, and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction. And then he says, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. And may the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word. Now, what I'm going to do tonight, I think my lesson is going to be very, very short. I hope it is. I say that sometimes and I end up going longer than I thought. But I'm going to give you the material very quickly, I think. And then we will probably shut down our live stream. And I'm going to make application to us here at Faith Baptist in particular, if I can do that. Anyway, what James is saying here, he says, it's almost like he's giving us a test. It's a test of our religion. James says, you want to know what pure religion is, what true religion really is, then I'm going to tell you. I'm going to show you how you can tell. I'm going to give you a test, and I'm going to show you what pure religion is, not what man says it is, not what religion says it is, but what God says it is. It is a test of our religion. Now, by the way, James, this is not unique to James. Jesus himself gave us such a test during his earthly ministry, and it was a big test. Jesus, in essence, said, you want to know how people are going to tell that you are my disciples. You know, in fact, he says, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples, not by how you look, not by what you wear. God help us. I don't know how we got in such a mess in our Baptist churches. but not by how you look, not by what you say, not by what you even believe, but it's by how you love. That's how people is going to tell if you really are my disciple. Remember, he said, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, so also you love one another. And by this shall all men know that you are my disciples. So Jesus gave us the test of our religion, is the litmus test of love. Well, James also gives us a test, but it's a little bit different. Whereas Jesus taught how we ought to love, James is more about how we ought to live. You see, James is probably the most practical book in the New Testament. I mean, James gets down to where we live. James gets down to the nitty-gritty, what day in and day out Christianity ought to be like, you know. James emphasizes more how we behave over what we believe. You understand what I'm saying? Now, he's not saying at all that it's not important what you believe. It is important what you believe. But what he's saying is more important how you behave. You see, in essence, what we believe really in our hearts should determine how we behave. Does that not make sense? In other words, if you don't live it, then you really don't believe it. So James says, you want to know, if a man among you seems to be religious, and you want to find out if it's the real thing or not, then take the test. I'm going to show you what pure religion is all about. Now, folks, sadly, so many of us do not live up to what we claim to believe. You see, what you believe should determine your behavior. Tell me all day long how much you love Jesus. And if you lay out of church more than you're in church, your behavior shows something quite different. Right? So, we don't live up to what we believe. C.H. Spurgeon one time told the story. He said he was in a diner having dinner, and he looked over and he saw this fellow looking at him with this mean look on his face. And he said, I looked away because I didn't want any kind of confrontation, public confrontation. But he said, every time I looked over at that fellow, he was looking at me, had that mean look on his face. So I finally decided I was going to go over and ask that fellow why he was so mad at me. He said, I got up and I realized I was looking in a mirror. He said it was a shock to see me, probably how other people saw me. It might shock you to see yourself the way other people see you. I mean, think about it, folks. What kind of Christianity are you portraying? What do people see when they look at you? What kind of Christ are you portraying before people? What kind of religion do you really have? Take the test, you see. I heard about this small town. We call it a one-horse town where I'm from, but it was a real small town, and it had 3 churches in that town. One was a Baptist church, one was a Methodist church, one was a Nazarene church or something like that. And all of them were struggling just to survive. Each one of them had 2 or 3 people, members, 4 or 5 members, they real small congregations, all of them struggling to survive, to make ends meet. And so finally, they decided in order to survive, they were going to unite all 3 of those churches together. What a mess that had to be. But they decided they was going to unite those 3 churches. Well, they did that, but then the fight came when they were trying to decide what to call that church. And somebody suggested, well, let's just call it a Christian church. And this old Baptist jumped up and said, look, I've been a Baptist all my life, and ain't nobody going to make a Christian out of me. You might as well laugh at yourself sometimes, folks, because that's the way a lot of us really act. I mean, think about it. What kind of Christianity are we showing to this world? What kind of Christ are we showing to this world? So James here says, I want you to take a test. We've talked about all these issues, and I'm not going to go back and review them with you, but we talked about all these things that we struggle with in this first chapter. Man, it's been a whale of a journey already through this first chapter. But he says, now it's time for a test. I want to show you what pure religion is all about. Now, you got to ask yourself, what kind of religion do you really have? And by the way, everybody's religious. You know, somebody says that religion is what a man does for himself outward. Does outwardly for himself. Salvation is what God does inwardly that you cannot do for yourself. And everybody's religious in some form or fashion. They don't want to admit it, but but what kind of religion do you have? You see, there's really only two kinds of religion. There is the pure religion, that is the true religion, that is the effective, the living, the lively kind of religion, the practical, the beneficial. And then there is the vain kind of religion. The kind of religion that is vain and void and useless. You're no earthly good to nobody in your religion. Now, which kind do you have? You know, now, folks, I want a pure religion. I want a true religion. We got too much of the vain and void and useless religion. I want pure religion. Well, James tells us here, then he says, well, take the test. Let's find out what kind of religion that we really have. Now, I'm going to give you these things very quickly, I hope, and without too much comment in between. I got scriptures written down here, and I'll give you these three thoughts. But number one, James says this, pure religion or true religion is seen by how you first speak with your tongue. Here's what he says. He says, listen, if anybody among you seems to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, he says that man's religion is what? Vain. In other words, pure religion helps bridle one's tongue. I just got to tell you, if we could just learn this first thing, it would improve all of us a great deal. If we'd want, you got to understand, folks, we are judged many times not just in what we do, but also what we say. And sometimes we need to learn to bridle our tongue. Sometimes we need to learn to shut our mouth. Sometimes we need to learn what and watch what we say and how we say it. Does that make sense? And so James said, and by the way, James talks a lot about tongues. If you know about the tongue in the book of James, here's what he says in verse number 6 of the 3rd chapter. And he says, the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. Isn't that right? There's been so many times in my life, I wish I could suck those words back in. You wouldn't have to do that so much if you'd learn to bridle your tongue. He says, the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body and setteth on fire the course of nature. And he says, and it is set on fire of hell. And so that's quite a way to describe your tongue, isn't it? It's a world of iniquity. You better learn to tame it. By the way, the Bible, as I said, I got scripture. Let me give you some. The Bible has a lot to say about our tongue. You want to know what causes the most problem in our churches? It's this. That's it. Well, he said, if you got pure religion, you're going to learn how to bridle your tongue. Here's what God says. And the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon, said this in Proverbs. He that keepeth his mouth, keepeth his life. But he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. He also said, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from destruction. We don't realize sometimes the power of our tongue. In fact, in the book of Proverbs, it says death and life, is in the power of the tongue. That's a very serious thing. We need to learn, in other words, to bridle our tongue. I read that in the English countryside, there's a little churchyard, and in the back of that churchyard was a graveyard. A lot of churches had graveyards. And one of the tombstones in there says, under this stone, a lump of clay, lies Arabella Young, who on the 24th of May finally learned to hold her tongue. In other words, she had to die before she learned to keep her mouth shut. One woman come to her pastor one time and said, every time I open my mouth, somebody in this church jumps down it. He said, I got a solution. Keep your mouth shut. That's hard stuff, isn't it? Somebody says the tongue is the only tool that actually gets sharper with use. The more you use it, the sharper that it gets. A Greek proverb says, I've often regretted my speech, but never my silence. I'm learning that the older I get. And so the idea is, pure religion then is seen in how we use our tongue. Folks, when you say something, it cannot be taken back. Can't be done. And so over and over, Proverbs says this, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that frameth his lips is wise. It says, a fool uttereth his whole mind. Have you ever met somebody that says, well, I'm just going to speak my mind? Then you are a fool. You're a fool. He says, a fool uttereth his whole mind. But he says, but a wise man keepeth it till afterwards. In other words, just because you think it doesn't mean you have to say it. I'm telling you, we'd learn a great deal if we'd learn that pure religion is seen by how you speak with your tongue. That's number one. Peter said this, he that will love life and see good days, he says, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips that they speak no guile. My mama used to say, if you don't have something good to say, don't say nothing at all. What kind of religion do you have? If you seem to be religious and you bridleth not of your tongue, you deceiveth your own heart, your religion's vain. That's number one. Number two, not only seen by how you speak with your tongue, but it's seen by how you spend your time. Verse 27, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows. Now, I'll be honest with you. I read that and I think, man, James, what in the world are you talking about? Surely there's more to pure religion than just doing that. What are you talking about? Here's the thing. James is getting, I think, down to the very essence of what being a real Christian is all about. You see, we've messed it all up. We have. And I've talked about this so much the last few weeks. In our churches, we've messed it up. Couple ideas. Number one, what he's teaching is that pure religion is seen in your service. You want to be a servant. The word servant is a very interesting word in the Scripture. It comes from the Greek word doulos, which means bondslave. It is also translated sometimes diakonos, which, by the way, fellas, means deacon. You see, a deacon is not the watchdog of the preacher. He's not a position of authority at all. He is a servant of the church. And so the idea is, being a bondslave, the idea is you have no rights of your own. You belong completely to your master. Your sole purpose in life as a bondslave is to do the bidding of your master. You're at his beck and call. You're to be a servant. That's the idea of what Christianity is really all about. And by the way, do you want to know the way you really serve him? Is by serving others. That's it. Now that's not foreign. It's not a foreign ideal to the Scripture. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what the example Jesus said. Jesus said the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto. He didn't come to be served, but to minister. He came to serve and give his life a ransom for many. He said one time, which of these is greater, he that sitteth at meat or he that serveth? Why, any lughead knows the boss man is the one sitting at the table, and the servant, he's the lowly one. He said, which of these is greater, he that sitteth at meat or he that serveth? But I am among you as he that serveth. He that would be chief, what did he say? Let him first be servant of all. Pure religion, what Christianity really is, you're not your own. You belong completely to your master. It is not about you anymore. What kind of religion do you have? It's not only to be a servant, but it's also to be sympathetic. He says, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction. I'm just going to say this to you. When God saves a person, he gives them a brand new heart. Or he gives them a compassionate heart, sympathetic heart. I've been around too many professed Christians that come across as some of the most hard-hearted people on the face of this earth. It ought not be that way. There's something wrong with your religion. I've been advised on a number of occasions. Whenever we help somebody, they say, well, they're just taking advantage of the church. So what? They'll be the ones to answer for that. You can never give too much. God will never judge you, church, for giving too much to somebody. He may very well judge us for not giving enough. You got to have a heart. You got to love people. Take the test. So, pure religion is seen by how you speak with your tongue, by how you spend your time, and then the third part of this is by how you separate from temptation. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and then to keep himself unspotted from the world. Let me tell you something, the world will spot you. This world does not have anything good for you. Why on earth do people want to keep going back to the world? Has nothing for you. It's like the story I told you about old Doc Campbell from Ehaw. When the fellow said, I like Doc Campbell's wisdom. He said, well, I broke my arm in 3 places. He said, well, then stay out of them places. Sometimes there's places you need to stay out of. You need to keep yourself unspotted from the world. What kind of religion do you have? I worry about our young people. As I said this morning, churches are losing young people. I'll tell you one reason. I'm convinced it's one reason. People have asked me or have mentioned our young people and how active they are. I sit, when our young people do the worship service, I sit back there and just cry. You know what our churches have done in modern times? We have kept our young people silent, haven't taught them how to worship, and we're losing them. But I worry about our young people because so many of them grow up, graduate, and then leave church. I wonder how many of you young people will be here a few years from now. This world will spot you. I remember, how many of y'all remember a fellow named Iron Eyes Cody? Everybody remember Iron Iris Cody? You'll remember this. Remember those commercials? Now I'm dating myself. Back in the 70s, Keep America Beautiful commercials of this Indian paddling a canoe down the stream. And he saw all the trash, and a single tear rolled down his cheek. And, and he was walking out in the field, and trash blowing everywhere, and you see a single tear rolling down his cheek. He's a Native American actor, but the secret is he really wasn't a Native American. He was Italian. But he looked exactly like a Native American. But Iron Iris Cody one time told a story about this young Indian boy who... after tradition, he was going to go out in the wilderness and fast for a few days and then have a test for his manhood, a challenge. And so this young Indian boy goes out and he finds this beautiful valley, green, lush valley, and he fasts for 3 days. And then on the third day of his fast, he looked around, he saw this snow-capped peak, and he said, that's going to be my challenge. And so he climbs and struggles up that big mountain. Iron Iris told this story, by the way, to Guidepost magazine several years. Remember Guidepost is his old devotional magazine. And he said the young boy struggled up that mountain. He got to the top, and when he got up to the top, it was like he's on the rim of the world. He could see forever. And he was so proud he beat that mountain. He won his challenge. He heard something rustle, and he looked down, and there was a snake at his feet. And the snake spoke to him. He said, listen, I'm dying. It's too cold for me on this mountain. There's no food around here at all. I'm dying. He said, would you please put me under your shirt, take me back down to the valley where I can find some food? And the young Indian boy said, no. He said, you're a snake. And I'm not going to put you under my shirt because you're a snake, and a snake bites. And I'm not going to do it. Snake kept pleading with him, finally convinced him. And the boy picked that snake up and stuck it under his shirt, carried it off that mountain, took it down to the valley, laid it down on the ground in the valley, and as soon as he did, that snake rattled and struck him, bit him. And the boy said, I can't believe you did that. You said you wouldn't bother me. You said you'd be different. And the snake said, young man, I'm a snake. And that's what snakes do. And you knew that when you put me under your shirt. That's what snakes do, and that's what I did. So the young boy died. Now, what's the moral of the story? I talk to young people who get out of church sometimes, folks, and they get themselves in a mess. And you know what? When you get involved in stuff like that, you know what's going to happen when you do it, but you do it anyway, and it can destroy you. Snake bites. Keep yourself unspotted from the world. We are to be different. Doesn't mean we're perfect, but we're to be different. So, take the test. Take the test. What kind of religion do you have? Is it the pure religion? You see it by how you speak with your tongue, by how you spend your time, by how you separate yourself from temptation. That's what real religion is. And folks, we got too much of the other kind in our churches. Now, let me apply. Brother Nathan, if you'll shut the live stream down.